Evening, everyone. Tonight our speaker is Right Worshipful Brother Bryan Adams. Right Worshipful Brother Bryan Adams was born and raised in the southern Ontario city of Windsor. He attended Brock University for a short time and then later joined a career as a financial advisor that lasted almost 45 years. He is currently the president of his own firm, which he and his son operate in Canada. He is a past president of the Goldberg Chamber of Commerce, previously sat on a review board for the Financial Services Commission of Ontario, and has served on the Executive Advisory Council for London Life nationally for more than 2 years. He and his wife, Doreen, live in Carp and have 2 children, Sean and Shannon. They also have 5 grandchildren. Bryan is a member of Carlton Lodge number 465 in Carp and was Master of the Lodge 2010-2011. He's also a member of St. John's Lodge number 63. Bryan has also been the district chairman of the Senior Wardens Mentoring Program for Ottawa District 1 for the past 5 years. In 2017-18, he was District Deputy Grand Master of Ottawa District 1. Bryan has had a number of interests and hobbies over the years, which have ranged from being a Formula One racing marshal in the 70s, which is really interesting, to writing a weekly sports column for a Toronto area newspaper and having a part ownership in a Junior B hockey franchise in the 80s, to his current hobby as a beekeeper. When you can't find Bryan in the bee yard, you can find him skiing, golfing, or relaxing at their cottage on Black Dong Lake. It is my great pleasure to present to you our speaker tonight, Right Worshipful Brother Bryan Adams.
Thank you, Wade. Appreciate that. My brethren and gentlemen, my remarks this evening will be primarily directed at those men who are attending the meeting that are considering making Masonry part of their life by joining our craft. My remarks will hopefully help you to discover why you would want to be a Mason. And I've approached that from the perspective of not telling you why you should be a Mason, but rather what it means to be a Mason. It's not enough to simply tell you that our fraternity is honorable and ancient, which it is. We need to give you a real feel for what it means to be a Mason. This evening, I'm here to speak to you because I was asked by my good friend and brother, Right Worshipful Brother Angus Gillis of St. Andrew's Lodge, to participate. Angus and I are both past District Deputy Grand Masters of Ottawa District 1, and he knows how very strongly I feel about mentoring those wishing to participate in Masonry after running the Senior Wardens Mentoring Program for some 5 years. I hope you're not disappointed, as my remarks will be brief. I am one who believes less is more. First, I'd like to focus on something that occurred at the first meeting that I attended, where one of you asked, what books could I read to understand what's expected of me and what it's like to be a Mason? Well, let me give you an answer to that by giving you an analogy. Let us say you were wanting to learn to ride a bike. A simple task, unless if you've never ridden one before. And then you may not find it quite so easy. You could read all the books in the world about how to ride a bike. However, until you actually do it, you'll never fully understand what it's like to ride a bike. But once you experience it, you'll never forget it. Hence the expression, it's just like riding a bike, meaning you'll never forget it. It is said that anything that, like anything else, you will get out of Masonry what you put into it. And by that, I mean, it will mean different things to different people. You will see things that others don't see in Masonry. And there will be some aspects that will be more important to you than to others. While in Lodge, we never discuss religion, politics, or our vocation. If you're thinking that by joining a lodge, you're going to grow your business or your wealth in a material sense, you're joining for all the wrong reasons. There is something called visitation or traveling in Masonry. And what that means is, like it says, visiting other lodges. Although we all follow the same ritual, you will notice some small variations in how they do the same ritual from lodge to lodge. For example, if you visit a lodge here in Ottawa called Edinburgh Lodge, you'll see a very different opening and closing of that lodge than you would at my lodge, for example. The reason for that is Edinburgh is what is referred to as a military lodge. And as such, they do things with a military flair and decorum. You may see lodge rooms that are laid out just slightly different than yours. Larger, smaller. My lodge, for example, has furniture from a lodge in Le Havre de France that was made in England by master craftsmen in the late 1800s. More on this later. These other lodges may also have certain traditions for their banquets that are different than your lodges. You will meet new Masons that you've never met before, and you'll get to know them. You'll also meet, or you may travel to another lodge and meet those same Masons again. And ideally, they will travel to your lodge and you will have an opportunity to introduce them. Hopefully, you'll travel to all the lodges in both our districts here in Ottawa that compose of approximately 25 lodges. So let's talk about what it's like or what it means to be a Mason. One of the reasons that I joined the Brotherhood was the fraternity. Sure, I had a grandfather and two uncles that were Masons. However, I grew up as an only child. Now I have thousands of brothers all over the world. I can travel to just about any country in the world, and there will be a lodge there that I can visit. And there'll be a brother there to welcome me with open arms. That's what it means to be a Mason. One of the other aspects of Masonry that drew me to it was the fact that we don't care what your color, your ethnicity, or your religion is. We only ask that you believe in a higher power. We do not care if you're a Jew, a Catholic, a Muslim. In fact, over the years, I've sat in very small lodge rooms with all three, side by side. What does that say about peace? If the world were a lodge room, what a more peaceful place it would surely be. That's what it means to be a Mason. All during history, there's been example after example of how Masons have proven to exhibit the best traits of man. For example, during the time of slavery in the United States, there would be stories of slaves seeking freedom, and they would travel north through the Underground Railroad to get there, and some of them would get caught. However, even though the person who discovered them may have been a slave owner, as soon as they found out they were a brother Mason, they would let them go. That is what it means to be a Mason. During various wars we've had through history, there have been countless stories of prisoners of war escaping with the help of a brother Mason from the other side. Although I'm not at liberty to share with you, there are various ways in which a man may let another man know that he's a Mason, that only another Mason would recognize. And once doing so, he would be bound to help. That is what it means to be a Mason. Earlier, I mentioned Edinburgh Lodge as a military lodge. Well, this follows a proud tradition from as far back as the Civil War and the War of 1812. During the War of 1812, both the American and British soldiers were Masons and had what was known as military lodges that traveled with them wherever they went. Their Masonic equipment was contained in a chest. And from time to time, they would get overrun by the enemy who would steal that chest. However, it was always returned under a flag of truce to their brother Masons. That's what it means to be a Mason. During the Civil War, one side would capture prisoners from the other side, and they would find that some of them were Masons. And they would either release them or they would offer them privileges not extended to other prisoners. For example, off the coast of Georgia, the Confederates had a prison on an island where they kept Union soldiers they had captured. However, once a month, when they held their Masonic meeting, they would release the Union prisoners to row over on their own to attend the meeting, and then let them row back and lock themselves back in their cells, as this was done on their Masonic honor. That's what it means to be a Mason. Earlier, I mentioned to you about my mother lodge, Carleton Lodge, that has furniture from France. Well, let me tell you about that. During the First World War, there were many men from various countries throughout the world fighting on the Allied side of the war against the Germans. Men from England, Australia, Scotland, New Zealand, Ireland, India, Burma, the US, and yes, Canada too. Many of them were Masons, and they were all looking for a way to escape the horrors of war for just a few hours. When the war ended in 1918, all the Allies went back to their own countries, and the lodge was abandoned, and the furniture sent back to England to be stored in a warehouse. That is, until a fire burned down Carleton Lodge in Cart to the ground, and we lost all of our furniture. One of those soldiers remembered about the furniture from Lodge Le Havre de Grace in France that was stored in that warehouse in England, and he arranged for it all to be shipped here to Canada. Someone also thought we might need a new carpet as well. So a man by the name of Eaton sent one of his people by train to Cart to measure the new lodge room, and our new carpet arrived a few weeks later, and we never received a bill. That's what it means to be a Mason. Let me tell you a true story that goes like this. A good friend of mine wanted to buy a pontoon boat. So he looked and looked and he finally found one down in the States, in Illinois, as it turns out. So he decided to travel down there to pick it up from the seller, whom he had never met and only talked to on the phone. So after a long journey, he arrived and he met the owner and finally saw the boat in person. And it was in mint shape, a real beauty. The owner of the boat noticed a Masonic ring on my friend's hand and asked if he was a Mason, to which he replied, yes, over 20 years. They shared their experiences of Masonry and found out that they were both past masters of their respective lodges. When it came time to pay for the boat, my friend offered an envelope with cash in it of many thousands of dollars for the agreed upon price of the boat. The man simply said thanks and turned to leave. Whereupon my friend said, don't you want to count it? It's a lot of money. The man just turned and said, if you can't trust a Mason, who can you trust? And wished him a safe journey home. That's what it means to be a Mason. At various times, you will see something else demonstrated in Masonry called charity. It may simply mean passing of the hat to help a fellow Mason or his family that are down on their luck. Or it may entail a province-wide campaign to donate to a hospital or for a cause such as autism. That is what it means to be a Mason. There's one other reason that you may want to be a Mason. We men don't wear our emotions on our sleeves. And as a result, we are usually very reserved and guarded, particularly in most public social interactions. We are in many respects like two dogs meeting for the first time and taking the measure of each other. One of the things about a lodge is that it's a protected forum. To be yourself and be willing to take some of those barriers down. In fact, the social aspect of Masonry is one of its most important parts and one we sometimes overlook. Both before and after lodge, there's usually an opportunity to sit down and really get to know your fellow Masons and just be yourself. That's what it means to be a Mason. If you decide that you would like to join our organization, you'll have to complete an application that will ask a few things about you. And you will need to have 2 existing Masons in good standing to be your sponsors. What is important to understand is that those 2 men will need to mentor and support you. Not just now when you're applying for membership, but all of your Masonic life. Not just as you pass through the 3 degrees of Masonry either, but beyond that as well. Helping you with memory work, answering your questions, supporting not only you, but also your family. So I'd encourage you to get to know who your sponsors will be and make sure they are someone you can work with. You will have a committee of established Masons come to your home to meet with you and any family you have. They'll ask several questions to determine the kind of person you are, and if you are the kind of person we want to be part of our craft. Just know we don't accept just anyone. When I have done this in the past for my mother lodge, I've always made a point of involving the man's family. It's important for them to know the commitment that we are asking of you and to see if they support you in this undertaking. Without the support of a wife or partner, you are pretty well doomed for failure. So let them be involved. Let them ask their questions too. So that's the end of my talk, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. However, first I'd like to express my thanks to the members of St. Andrew's Lodge for their hospitality and generosity in letting a non-member of their lodge participate in this venture. That too speaks to what it means to be a Mason. Thank you, and stay safe.